What's up, everybody? NFX here. In this video, I have a presentation which I'm calling the State of AI Music in June 2025. It was about a year ago that UMG brought the lawsuit against Suno and Udio, who are AI music providers. And I just wanted to talk about it a little bit, and hopefully I can give you a simplified breakdown and analysis of the situation. Of course, all this is my opinion, but I'm going to do my best to give you the facts. I'm making this video because I've seen more and more videos lately that talk about AI, and in some cases are misinformed how it works. My perception is that people are making assumptions about AI music generation based off their own emotional feelings about it. And my goal is to educate and inform only. I honestly do understand why people dislike AI music. And I understand why people like AI music, okay? I also believe that a lot of anti-AI people out there haven't even tried it. So they don't really understand it. They're just kind of running off of things that they may have been told or assumptions that they're making about the AI. A lot of this is coming off of the heels of some stuff that Timbaland has said or done online recently. And he is also very uninformed about some things. And this isn't to him or to any specific person. This is just like an overall talk about it. I'm not trying to evoke emotional responses with this video, but there may be some people that feel a certain way. I know that in the past, in my dealings on Reddit, there have been some people who just don't like AI and they don't want to hear anything about it, and that's okay. If you want to make a comment about this video, please do, in either side of the argument. I am not interested in debating for or against AI, though, okay? I'm waiting for the courts to make their decisions, and then I'll adjust my outlook and my opinion about AI music generation accordingly. Now, I need to give you guys full disclosure. Some of you who don't know, I do use Suno myself. I make AI-generated vocals with it. And the short story is I provide Suno my music and lyrics, and it generates a vocal performance that I can use in my productions after I use a stem separation tool to get the vocal. Now, the vocal performance, because I've uploaded my music, it will match its key, its tempo, and feel, etc. And as corny as this may sound, I see it similar to a collaborative effort, as if the AI was a real singer putting a performance to my music. Then I complete the track, and I use the singing as a guide for the overall arrangement. And for me, it's a tool that works to fill my weakness of not being a good singer or rapper. But this presentation isn't about that. After this slide here, I hope not to even mention it anymore. You can check my page on youtube.com/warbeats for the videos on how I do it if you're interested. I do have an hour-and-a-half long video that shows my exact process if you're interested in seeing that. A disclaimer here is that I am not a lawyer. I do that for legal reasons, obviously. I don't want to give, this is not for legal advice. This is opinion. Nor am I an AI specialist. People who are into AI know a lot more about AI than I do. And in this presentation, I'm going to interpret the legal and technical situation in my own way. I'm going to try to explain things logically, and you can agree or disagree. And if you have any comments, again, leave them in the comments and let me know if you can inform me or you have questions or whatever. I have been a computer programmer for over 40 years. I'm an older guy. I have lived a good life. I'll be 60 next year. So just to give you an idea of where I'm at, um, I will do my best to define and analyze things so you can see how I formulate my understandings on things. And in this uh, presentation, I'm going to mostly mention Suno, but other services may apply, such as Udio or a newer one called Riff Fusion. I don't want to go into depth about some of the non-legal implications, such as musicians losing work to AI. Quite honestly, DAWs and plugins have been doing that more and more over the years. That's a whole other discussion. I don't want to talk about how AI music is soulless. I'm the type that says, let the listener decide. If someone hears something and it's soulless, it's soulless. Okay? But if it resonates with them, then it resonates with them. That's up to the listener, in my opinion. With respect to spamming automated AI music to streaming services, I don't like it. I do think that it's not a good thing. But I also feel like it's one of these things that as technology moves forward, there's going to be things we don't like. And we have to learn how to deal with it. You know, before there was spam emails, you had to have email, right? So before there was, toxic online comments, you had to have a way of putting comments online. So this is one of those things, I believe, that you don't have to like it, obviously, but you do have to understand that it's going to exist. With respect to vocal cloning or deep fakes, this is technically a legal issue, but I believe it should be done only with permission. Okay, and finally, I'll reiterate, I understand that AI music can be an emotionally hot topic for some people, and I'm not going to try to convince those that hate it to love it or vice versa. I just want to focus on the technical and legal aspects around the issue. The issue is changing rapidly, and I don't know how long this info will be relevant, but as of the recording of this, which is June 22nd, 2025, it is relevant and up to date as much as I can have it be. So first, let's talk about what it is we're actually going to be talking about. We're talking about generative AI music. And what that means is it's music that is created or generated it's generated by a computer, essentially, or programming, but it's based off something called a machine learning model. And that's where the computer is given some data and then it makes patterns and statistical representations of that data. And the output can include things like melodies, harmonies, drum beats, and a lot of things. Even vocals can come out of that. One of the important aspects is to understand how AI music is trained. Okay, music AI is trained by feeding it a large amount of music-related data, and then these AI will essentially look at that data and develop some kind of understanding, if you will, about it. Now, the input isn't the audio itself. The audio is actually converted into some machine readable or computer readable data. So oftentimes this could be something called tokens, spectrograms, or latent codes. From that, the model starts to look at it and adjusts, billions of numerical weights. Maybe not billions, but millions. It's a lot. It's so many that I couldn't tell you. But it uses that to predict patterns in the data. And we'll talk about this a little bit more detail in the next slide. But after the training is completed, the original files, meaning the audio and the data that it's converted, like the spectrograms or whatever, is discarded. There's no need to keep it around because what you're doing is you're building the statistical models, often called model weights. And once you have that, you don't need the original data anymore. And one of the legal questions with respect to how AI music trained is, was the source material obtained legally? And that's one of the questions that the court's going to have to offer their opinion on. Now, as far as is the source material stored for later use, meaning are snippets of it stored, or actual audio clips, or the full song stored? And the answer to that is a definite no. It does not do that. Let's take a look at an oversimplified training example. And I say oversimplified because this is really, it's oversimplified. And it's just done that way to kind of give you a basic understanding of how the system works. So the first thing that happens is the data is collected and it's turned into something that the machine can read. And in the picture in the first box there, you can see what's called a spectrogram. Many of you who are into audio production have probably seen something like that before. And I don't know how much you know about a spectrogram, but a spectrogram can show you a lot of things. It can show you rhythms. It can show you notes. It can show you a lot, tempos. There's a lot that can be understood about the audio just by looking at a spectrogram. Other things you would have to tell the system about. And that's where the second square rectangle comes in, and that's helping the AI understand what's called the context of it. Meaning you're going to feed in that spectrogram, and then you're going to tell it, we're using a trap song as a demonstration, but you're going to tell it that the genre is trap, that it's tagged with it having 808s and hi-hat rolls and synthesized drums and sub bass, etc. You're going to either tell it, or it's going to learn from looking at that data the tempo and the key, and then you may tell it the mood of that particular song. So you're going to give it these basic attributes, and it's going to then look at that spectrogram and make weighted statistics about that. And in the third rectangle there, it says stored as numerical weights. Okay, now I'm going to use genre as a very simple example here. So because we know this is trap, the trap weight is going to get maybe a +10. But the rock weight is going to get a +0 because maybe this doesn't have any rock in it, no guitars or anything. The rap weight might get a +4. It's not, it's a trap song, but trap songs often have rapping in them. So it might get a little bit of weighted value from that. EDM might be a +1. There are EDM songs that do have synthesized drums and maybe similar tempos and things like that. So it might get a little bit of a match there. But the folk music is going to get a 0. It's not going to match, so it's not going to put any value into the weight for folk music for this song. And these are just additives. So as it does more and more trap songs, it learns more and more about the trap genre. And then once the weighting is done, the data is deleted. By the way, genre I'm just using as the example, but it can be things like frequencies and arrangement style and instrumentation and tempo and key and a bunch of other things that are weighted in the same way. If not thousands of things, hundreds of thousands of things. If not 100,000 of things, maybe 1 million things. It's a lot of data that's just weighted. But the key thing to understand is the data is deleted once it's done. Okay. Now, if we think about different types of songs, we can look at a simplified, again, version of what songs with multiple weights might look like. So here you could see on the left side there are some music prompts listed where you see it say slow jazz with upright bass, romantic classical piano, and there's that list. And then across on the bottom there are the audio traits such as the tempo, the rhythmic complexity, the bass intensity, etc. And you can see how there are just some sample weights put in there. So if you're reading from left to right, you can see, for example, in the middle of the list, it says hard trap beat with 808s, and it's got a 1 in tempo and a 0.83 in rhythmic and a 1 in bass and a 0.86 in mood darkness, etc. And if you look at UK drill, which is right below that, it has similar numbers or close numbers, right? 0.83 is somewhat close to 1 on the rhythmic complexity. And you could see that by using these weights, it can tell when things are near each other in terms of style. So because it's using these weights, it knows a hard trap beat with 808s is very similar to a UK drill with dark mood. Okay, and these are just numbers, remember. These are numerical statistics about it. Now, let's talk about humans versus AI training. Humans learn how to make music. A lot of times they may watch tutorials, but outside of that, what do? Well, there's pretty much 5 steps that a human takes when it's learning. And there's an AI counterpart to that or correlation to that as well. So step 1, humans listen and absorb the patterns. If you're trying to learn pop punk, for example, you're going to listen and you're going to go, they use guitar, they use this tempo, they use maybe these common rhythmic patterns when playing the guitar, etc. And that's what the AI is doing with its statistical models. It's exactly listening and absorbing the patterns. The only difference, not the only difference, but obviously the difference between an AI and a human is a human remembers things and learns things differently than an AI. An AI can also learn what it needs with one listen, whereas a human might need to listen multiple times to catch all the differences in the music. Step 2, a human can mimic and practice that music. In other words, the more they do it and the more they mimic it, the better they can get at it. And the AI does this as well. During the training, when it knows it's trying to understand a genre of music, it is actually imitating, trying to get to that music, so it understands how to form that type of music. In steps 3, 4, and 5 for a human, I have a little asterisk next to those because those, number 3, internalize the rules and the nuance. AI can't really do that. It can imitate, but AI doesn't have any intuition, so it can't really do that. Number 4 is understand cultural context. Again, AI doesn't have awareness. It's not able to understand the cultural context in the same way that a human would. And number 5, create with intent and emotion. Obviously, the AI is not conscious. The AI has no intent and emotion other than to provide what it imitates and believes that the human is asking it to do based off its training. Now, the red asterisk there are there because I believe these last 3 are where humans take it to the next level. Okay, these are more advanced things about music that the AI cannot do, but a lot of humans don't do it either. Okay, these are things that come along with the mimic in practice, and the more the human involves themselves in the art of creating music, they begin to get the attributes of 3, 4, and 5 and become more advanced at music and understanding. Okay, and this is one of the areas where I don't know if AI will ever be able to do that. But, it definitely is probably the thing that separates AI and humans the most when it comes to music. Obviously, we can hear that AI can make basic tracks, and but so can someone who just goes and watches a tutorial and then follows the tutorial. Even if they don't fully internalize the rules and the nuance, they can learn where to put the snares and what sounds to use, and things that don't require some of the more advanced and deeper understanding. One of the things that Suno does is it allows you to upload your own audio. And I want to talk about this in so much as it allows you to upload your audio, and then using that, it will make something kind of like a remix of your music. That's what I do, and I also tell it to add the vocals, and then I can get those vocals. But when you upload, you must own the rights to any audio you upload. This is one of the problems that Timbaland did, is he uploaded a beat that was made by someone else. Okay. And the same thing applies to lyrics. You must own the rights to the lyrics that you paste in. Suno does create lyrics for you if you want it to. But if someone wants to upload their own lyrics, they can do that. Now, if someone does upload copyrighted audio or lyrics that is not theirs, it's the user who has broken the terms of service, okay? Some people want to blame the AI as if the AI knew that it was copyrighted and shouldn't have done anything with it. And the way to think about it is it's similar to if someone uploads a copyright music or video to YouTube, right? Now, YouTube does have content ID. They do have ways of looking for that, but not everything gets caught. And you have to think of who's at fault when that happens. Now, the audio that you upload, Suno will use it to create some output. But it doesn't train on that audio. So any audio that you upload, it's not training on the audio to try to make something similar. It's simply using it as a starting point for its generation of audio. And so uploading audio has no influence on the AI training, and that audio is not somehow added into Suno's AI models or database. Let's talk about output generation. Okay, we've talked about how the input, the training happens. Now let's talk about how the output happens, because this is also very important to the topic. Suno and Udio use something that's called a diffusion model. And basically what that means is the AI starts with a random noise, and then it starts to clean up the noise and shape it. And it does this over several steps, many steps. And as it starts to clean up the noise, it starts to sound more and more like something cohesive. Now, it is guided by your prompt, right? I like to think about it as if you were carving a sculpture out of a piece of, let's say, driftwood, right? You're at the beach, you see a piece of wood that's washed up on the shore or something, or at a lake or something. And you pick up that piece of wood and you go, I want to carve this into a fish. And that wood's going to have natural curves and shape to it, which is going to kind of dictate how that fish is going to be posed, or how it's going to look, or maybe what fish it is, etc. Okay? And that's just a random piece of wood. You might walk a little bit, find another piece of wood, and you want to carve that into a fish, but it's curved differently, it's colored differently, it's bigger, it's smaller, it's whatever. And so that's going to result, you can carve it into a fish, but it's going to result in a different fish, or a different looking fish. And that's kind of how the diffusion model works, by using the random noise in the beginning, is that as it starts to carve it and form that thing, it's going to be different. Okay? So when you prompt for something like sad trap beat with female vocals at 90 BPM about heartbreak, the AI will look at that and it'll turn it into the attributes that it can use. For example, it'll say the genre is trap, the mood is sad, the instruments are going to be 808s, hi-hats, and ambient pads. The vocal style is female and emotional. the tempo's 90 BPM and other things, okay? Then it'll take the random noise and it'll start carving it out until it matches the weights of those attributes, okay? So it doesn't know, like you as the human might know what sad is. It only knows that weights for sad are a certain value. So as it's carving this out, it will try to match that sad weighted value. Remember, the AI doesn't use any direct audio that it was trained on, only the statistical weights. So let's take a look at the statistical weights again. And so, like, if we were trying to go with reggaeton party vibe type music, right? You can see how the weights, and this is the last one on the list here, you can see how the weights are 0.5, 0.5, 0.71, 0.29, and 1, right? So as it's carving out this random noise, it's going to carve it out till the tempo, when it runs the numerical analysis on it, the weight for tempo is going to be 0.5 or close to it. It may not go for the exact number. It may have some wiggle room in there. It's going to carve it out till the rhythmic complexity is a 0.5. It's going to carve it out until the bass intensity is a 0.71, etc. So its target are these numbers, okay? That's what its target is. It's not, let me make something like a Daddy Yankee song or a Bad Bunny song. It's let me make something until I reach something close to these numbers for the various attributes that I'm trying to get at. Now, as we continue, let's talk about something that's really important, and that's the difference between sampling, interpolation, and the way AI works. There are some really key differences here. With all three of these type of things, you're talking about what is it that's reused when making the output, and does that need a license, essentially? So with sampling, what's reused? Well, it's the actual audio, right? It's the actual audio is copied. So if you're on an MPC, you're going to sample the actual audio. When you make the output or the completed product from that, you are using what's been copied from the original sample. Now, you might filter it, reverse it, or do whatever, slow it down, speed it up, etc. But it's been copied from the original. And does that need a license? Well, yeah, it does. It needs a license for the recording that you copied as well as for the composition of that. So meaning the artist that recorded it and the writers of the song, right? With interpolation, that's when you remake or reperform things like the melody and the lyrics. Now, in that, the output of what you make is recreated, but it's similar. And does that need a license? Well, yes, it does. But since you're not using the original recording, it only needs a license for the composition only. This is one of the things that early on Dr. Dre used to do a lot, is he would get a nice sample, but then he'd have his studio musicians reperform it to avoid having to pay the recording license fees or get clearance from the recording artist for those things. And it's still done to this day. It's not uncommon. Okay, so let's talk about AI generation now. What's reused when the output is created by AI? Well, there's no direct reusing of the audio nor the melody or lyrics. Okay, it's simply creating based off patterns that it has statistically determined. Okay, so this is very important when you think about how AI works. Some people think that AI will take original audio that exists and somehow include that in their output. And this is untrue. It does not. It does learn patterns from the audio, and then it attempts to match patterns from not one song, but hundreds of thousands or millions of songs. And so it's not trying or attempting to copy any one thing in particular. Now, the output is going to be stylistically similar, and potentially, yeah, you might end up with something that sounds similar to an existing recording, but we'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. But it's not designed to do that. Now, does that need a license when you create the output? Well, that's unclear at this time. That needs to be decided in court. Okay, essentially. That's kind of where we're at and why I'm talking about this process. Now, some of you may have seen some of the examples that the record companies used to show that the output of some of these companies was infringing upon their copyright. And I looked at some of these examples myself. And quite honestly, many of the examples I saw were done against the Suno and Udio terms of service. And this brings up a question as to who's responsible. But let me give you an example of what I mean. There's one that goes around, a lot of people talk about it. It's called the Jason Derulo tag. Okay. And the AI, I've seen the video, and the video shows the AI prompt, and it shows not how it was created, not when it was created, but it shows enough information that I could try to recreate it myself. But in this one, the AI was asked to sing Jason Derulo as its only lyric. So in the lyrics, this was the only lyric that was put in there. And I don't know how many times the user had to hit create until it came up with a tag that was similar to Jason Derulo's tag. But I did try to recreate it. And I did about 10 songs trying to recreate it. And I could not get a similar result. It did sing Jason Derulo, but not the way he does it. In some cases, it didn't even sing Jason Derulo. It just made up its own gibberish type lyrics. But that was my only prompt. Now, from the time that the Jason Derulo example was made, Suno has updated their model several times. I think when the Jason Derulo lyric was made, it was at version 3, and it's now at version 4.5. So it could be that changes have been made, but I don't know. There were other examples in the video I'd watched where artist names were put into the prompt, and you're not allowed to do that. You're not supposed to do that. But what they did is they put in Mariah Carey, but with spaces between each of the letters in an attempt to circumvent the system, right? And then additionally, they put the copyrighted lyrics for a Mariah Carey song into the lyric box. This was on Udio, actually. And the output did sound similar to Mariah Carey's Christmas song. But the user asked for music that sounded like that and put Mariah Carey's name in there, and also posted the copyright lyrics. So they've circumvented the terms of service. And then again, I have to ask, who's at fault there? Is it the AI's fault, or is it the user who needs to do the right thing? You know, in some way, I almost feel like this is like the MPC that allows you to sample music. Is it the fault of the MPC that you can sample existing songs into it? Or is it the user who's responsible to ensure that they're not using copyrighted material when they put it into the MPC? Because the MPC doesn't prevent it. But again, this is a legal question that I guess the courts will have to look at. So my opinion is the users did make some similar sounding output, but they had to try to break the system. They had to try to make similar sounding music. And if you have to try to break it, whose fault is it? That's again my question. Now, there are some known legal cases. These are the ones I kind of know about off the top of my head. I don't want to say I know about all of them. I don't. But there are cases, one in China and one in India, They've already had rulings based off voice duplication, and both were won by the person whose voice was stolen. This doesn't really relate to music generation, but I thought I'd mention it. There's one case in the US, Concord Music Group versus Anthropic, which is about lyric training. So Anthropic is using lyrics, copyrighted lyrics, to train their AI on how to make lyrics. That's a case that's in progress at this time. And then within the last week or maybe month, but very recently, there have been a couple of class action lawsuits that I've seen. And, when you're talking about class action lawsuits, basically my feeling on it is that law firms and the primary plaintiffs are the people whose name actually appears on the case, are the biggest winners there. And technically it's the law firms. And I'm going to break that down for you just to give you an example of why I believe that. Now, the landmark U.S. case of UMG versus Suno is ongoing. Okay, it's not over. It's in what's called discovery phase, which is very early. And in all U.S. cases that I know of, no rulings have been made as of, well, I say June 21 here, but today, as I'm recording this, is the 22nd. So there have been no rulings against Suno or Udio or for UMG at all. So, be aware of that. Someone may have an opinion that they don't like AI and that Suno is stealing or whatever, but until the legal opinions come down from the courts, no rulings have been made. And that's just the facts. Now let's talk about class action lawsuits just for a minute, because I want to make sure you guys understand how these things work. Basically, what happens is a class action lawsuit is brought on by the primary plaintiffs and a law firm together, and they represent what's called the class members. Now, in the case of these class action lawsuits, who are the class members? Well, the class members would be the songwriters, producers, labels, publishers, artists that they say that they're fighting for, okay? And they're going to sell it like they're fighting for your rights and yada, yada, yada. Okay, fine. Some good may come out of it. I'm not saying it wouldn't be anything good. But let's look at some numbers real quick. Here are some conservative estimates about songwriters and how many people could potentially be in this as a class member. Not the primary, not the law firm, but the class member. Well, there could be over 1 million songwriters, over 500,000 producers, over 10,000 labels, over 10,000 publishers, and I'm saying over 2,000 or 2 million rather artists. If you ask Spotify, how many unique artists do you have? They're going to tell you they have 8 million. Okay, so I believe my number is conservative. So I'm going to say 3 to 5 million people will be class members if the law firms do their due diligence and actually attempt to include everybody who should be included in these as class members. Okay. If we break that down into a hypothetical of $100 million class action suit, and let's just say, for the sake of argument, the class action suit wins and the Suno or Udio or whomever is ordered to pay $100 million. Okay. How does that money then get distributed? Well, this is hypothetical and these numbers could vary a little bit, but this is generally a ballpark how it's going to go. The class members, meaning all of the producers and artists and record labels, etc., are going to get about 35%. So that means $35 million is going to be spread across potentially millions of people. If we use my conservative number of 3 million, that means each person would receive approximately $11.67. If we use the Spotify numbers of 8 million, that goes down to $4.38. So a law firm could potentially go to Spotify and say, give us a list of your artists so we can notify them that we won the lawsuit and they're going to get a little piece of that pie. It is definitely a little piece of that pie. Now, the lead plaintiffs, this is the person whose name is on the verses of the court case. So it's going to be, so and so versus Suno. It has to be a person. I think it might be able to be a company too. But whoever's name is on that thing, and it could be more than one, but they're going to get about $5 million, and it could be split between them if there's more than one. Now, the class counsel, those are the lawyers who are doing the class action. They get 30%. They get about $30 million out of that, right? So when you hear someone say, I've opened this class action lawsuit and I'm fighting for you guys, the little guy. Well, okay, but they're really fighting for themselves first because they're going to get the biggest piece of the pie. About 15% or 15 million is used for administrative costs, and that's things like managing the claims, mailing the notices, and handling all the paperwork. Now, who does that? Well, I don't know. Maybe it's the law firm. So maybe that 15 million goes also to the law firm. So now they're up to about 45 million. Finally, there's a thing called cypre. And about 15% of that will go to potentially to public interest projects. For example, maybe there are music creator rights groups that exist, or that, let's say it, class counsel may have friends who are in some of these rights groups and they're going to get a little piece of that pie. Relatively big piece of that pie. But that's put aside for that. So you can see that, even though they're fighting for you, and I'm not saying no good will come out of it in terms of the ruling, but who really benefits from here? To me, it's the lead plaintiffs and the class counsel. So while it may sound good to say they're fighting for you, realistically, are they? That's my question. Now let's break down the UMG versus Suno specifics, okay? The UMG case makes two significant claims. One, that copyright infringement occurs during training. That is to say that they're using the music to train the AI without license. And that two, the copyright infringement occurs on the output. And that is to say that the AI generates work similar enough to infringe upon their copyrights. And remember, the court hasn't ruled on either one. So claiming that either position, that's someone's opinion if they want to claim it, but there's no legal basis for that until the court makes its rulings. Let's go a little bit into what does UMG have to prove in the sense of copyright infringement during the training? Well, there are about three things that I can think of. One is ownership, and that means that UMG owns the songs that were used. Two is that copying occurred. In other words, that Suno copied UMG's music into its training data set, not just referenced or described it, but copied it. And that three, copying was not authorized. And so, in other words, a license would have been required, and fair use does not apply in that scenario. Now, with respect to these three things, I think there are likely legal arguments that Suno can use. For the ownership question, Suno has admitted it used commercially available songs, so it's not going to be challenged. The real question is that illegal on the surface? And I would say my opinion is probably not. And admitting that you use commercially available songs would be the same as a YouTuber admitting that they listened to a commercially available song so that they could bring you this tutorial on how to make something similar to it. In other words, just saying you're using it doesn't make it illegal. Okay? The court will have to decide if licensing was required and that sort of thing, but admitting that you used commercially available songs could be just telling the truth. I mean, we all, as we listen to music online and potentially learn from these songs, are using commercially available songs. Now, did the copying occur? This is a question. This is a definite question. We know that based off how AI is trained, that Suno doesn't keep copies of the audio. They generate the statistical weights, and then they don't need the audio nor the data that they converted the audio into. And, there's no way to correlate which weights used which songs, because the weights are just growing or shrinking or whatever. They're not necessarily when the AI is being trained, it's not saying this is a Mariah Carey song and therefore I'm going to put this into that bin, and this is a Travis Scott song, so I'm going to put it into that bin, and this is an Eminem song, so it's going to go into that bin. It doesn't work that way. So it does temporarily copy, and then once it gets its statistics from it, it deletes it. Now, can fair use apply? Well, I think Suno may argue about that. The Suno CEO, I think, has been quoted as saying that he believes fair use could apply. And the reason is that the AI is not designed to make a copy of the music. It just isn't. Whether or not they can convince the court about that, that's a whole other issue, right? But the system is really designed to make a transformative work in a similar style using the weighted data, not to make an exact copy. Now, if something appears in the training data very often, it could be that it makes something similar. Potentially, this might be where the tags issue comes in, because if you listen to 100 mustard songs, you're going to get the mustard on the beat tag, and that might increase the way that the song is generated and potentially get something similar. Again, we're only talking about, let's say, 100 songs out of millions, but the possibility is there, right? But as of now, there's no legal precedent for AI training. And that's why this case is important, and that's why we have to see what's going to happen. Now, we know that in the 5 steps of learning music, that humans learn in a similar way to the AI. They listen to the copyrighted songs in a genre. They use their own internal pattern matching and learning ability to make their own statistical understandings of the rhythms and the sounds. You hear ask any type beat maker if they're trying to make a Kanye type beat, right? What are they doing? Well, potentially they're taking a vocal sample from a older soul song. They're pitching it up. They're putting a beat underneath it, etc. You know what I'm saying? So in the human way of doing things, the human also temporarily copies the song. I mean, technically speaking, if I'm streaming a song from either YouTube or Spotify on my device, it's actually buffering the song temporarily onto my device. So I'm also, as the human, making a temporary copy. And I'm listening to it and I'm trying to learn from it. Is that fair use? And the reason why I bring this up is because if UMG wins against Suno on this issue, how might it affect a human who's a type beat maker? I mean, picture this scenario. A guy's on SoundCloud, he puts up his music and he puts up a Kanye type beat or Travis Scott type beat or whatever, okay? A rapper hears the beat, says, hey, I can drop something on that. I like that beat. And they take the beat and they use it and they make a song. Kind of like the Old Town Road guy. I forgot his name. Right? He heard a beat. I'm not saying that was a type beat, but it's an example of a SoundCloud person, a person on SoundCloud getting a beat, making a hit song out of it, right? But picture if the original beat was listed as a type beat. And UMG goes, hey, this thing is making millions of dollars now. And if we look at the history of it, so and so originally posted this beat as a Travis Scott type beat or a Drake type beat. That means they copied our artist. And if they copied our artist, we should be collecting money on that. Now, I know it might sound ridiculous to people who don't want to open their eyes and look at it, but if UMG wins this part of the lawsuit, it could affect humans as well. You might have to not post your beats as type beats anymore because, someone could potentially claim it later. Now, moving on, let's talk about copyrights infringements for the output. Okay. Again, there are about three things that I think UMG has to prove. One is access. In other words, that Suno have access to the copyrighted material. Two, was there substantial similarity? So did the AI generate outputs that were substantially similar? Okay. That is to say, they copy specific melodies or lyrics and structure. Not just that they meet the general idea of the genre. Okay. And that's where the third item, no independent creation, that means that the resemblance wasn't coincidental or a general genre trope. So it sounds more than just that's in the same genre. It actually has the same melody or lyrics, something like that. There has to be more than just it sounding as though it fits in the genre. Now, the likely legal arguments for Suno in this case, for the access, well, Suno, as I mentioned before, they've already admitted they've had access to the commercially available audio. Now, were they trained on? I don't know. I honestly don't know. I've heard a lot of people mention various things. Some people say they use TikTok, they use YouTube, they use Spotify, they used any available thing out there. And that may be true. In other words, anything that a human could have accessed, they accessed. Okay, I don't believe that they did anything nefarious in terms of, going to a torrent to download MP3s of the music and then use that. I think they did grab everything from freely available sources. Licensing aside, I don't believe that they illegally accessed the audio. But again, this is a court decision that needs to be made. With respect to substantial similarity and independent creation, a thing that Suno could argue is that humans make similar songs both on purpose and on accident. And that with humans, you don't blame the tool that they used, right? If someone uses a DAW and remakes a song and then tries to put it out as their own, you don't blame FL Studio, you blame the guy making it, right? And that songs should be judged on a per song basis. In other words, the human should do their own due diligence to ensure they aren't infringing on a copyright. And they should be held accountable if it does. And remember, the nature of AI does not attempt to remake or cover a song. It just doesn't. That's technically fact. We talked about how the diffusion AI works, and that doesn't mean that similar output is 100% impossible, right? But it's not likely. And there could be coincidental similarities here and there. My personal take is that there are millions of Suno songs by now. And I'm guessing that most of those millions, I don't know what percentage, but probably a high percentage of them do not infringe on other works. The songs that UMG provided as examples, as I mentioned before, were made by attempting to break Suno's rules. They were made by attempting to create an output that would look as if they were breaking Suno's rules. And that's where I ask you again, who's responsible for that? The human or the tool? Okay? And the the court will have to decide this. If Suno can explain the way AI works, I believe Suno's likely to win at this argument, because it'll be very clear that Suno is not trying to create a copy, use any type of existing audio. It really is just a mathematical function that it's trying to match a value. That's it. My basic conclusion is, until the court rules on these two major questions, training and output, there is no law that Suno has been proven guilty of violating. Actually, technically, I believe this is a civil case anyway, so this wouldn't be a criminal case, but they'd have to be shown guilty of something in order to pay. And as of my recording of this video, there's nothing that they've been proven guilty of violating at all. Now, what's the future of AI beyond the Suno case? Well, UMG is not rejecting AI. As a matter of fact, it wants a music AI ecosystem, and they claim they want the artists and the rights holders, and I put rights holders in quotes because basically they're talking about themselves, to be compensated and in control. And, you know, they've actually attempted to go to Suno and Udio and these people and say, give us a piece of your company, let us in on the technology. And that's really, I think, what they're going for. You know, they're going to tell you it's for, you know, the benefit of artists and everybody else, but really they want to get their hand in the cookie jar. They want to get their foot in the door. And, you know, it's probably a good decision for them to want to do that, to be honest. They kind of slept on MP3s and streaming back in the day, and it didn't work out for them, and they had to kind of scramble to get on board with all that stuff. With respect to what UMG is proposing, I've made this slide here just to show my own opinion on a few things here. With respect to content-based training, I think that's fair. Basically, what that means is the AI should only train on licensed or opt-in content. I think that's fair. Licensed content kind of goes to the second item on the list called licensing deals. And I think, again, if the AI companies can negotiate licensing agreements with UMG, that's fine. I think it's going to have to be at a price point that makes sense for everybody, because if UMG is trying to get a cash grab out of this and overcharge for licensing, they're not going to get it, period. The AI companies will adjust and just not include UMG or train on free music or whatever. But if UMG is smart, they can negotiate licensing agreements at a comfortable price point. I think that is fair. As far as artists' control over their voice and their likeness, I think absolutely this should be a thing, okay? I don't believe AI should be... the AI will always be able to do the thing, okay? AI can clone voices today. Again, it's not the fault of the AI, though. When Drake did his diss and he used the AI Snoop and the AI Tupac, nobody went to the person who made the tool that was used for those voices and said, that tool is evil. It recreated Tupac and Snoop's voice. No, they went to Drake and they said, you did dirty right there. That you shouldn't have done that. So in other words, the AI is not the one at fault. It's the person using the tool to do these things. But I absolutely agree that artist control over voice and likeness should be something. Now, in the UMG proposal, they did use the word style, and I think that's where it's kind of a gray area. And the reason why I say that is style can be, many people can have a similar style, and something I'll say about that is, like, for example, if you think about like a Baptist preacher having fiery sermon, right? There's a certain style to that delivery. And I've heard that from different people, different styles. I mean, there's people that say Tupac had a little bit of that style in there. There's songs like from people like Mystical who kind of have that preacher style. Okay. So I don't know that style is a good term to try to put the clamps on there, but you know, if you need to, you can argue over the details of it later. With respect to monetization and royalty sharing, I don't think that's likely, but what that means is that all the rights holders must be paid. And that includes composers, producers, performers, and labels. Again, labels, right? So that means UMG. Now, on the surface, this doesn't sound good. I agree. It doesn't sound good, but I'll tell you why I don't believe this is likely in a second. With respect to transparency in data sets, meaning should the AI companies disclose what songs were used when they did their training? That's fair. I don't think it makes sense, but it's fair. But it really depends on what is it used for. If you're trying to use it for monetization and royalty sharing, it's useless. And again, I'll explain why in a second. With respect to attribution and metadata, again, that's a not likely scenario in my opinion. I'll tell you why. But that's where should the AI tools preserve and support metadata and attribution data for the source creators. And this goes back to the monetization and royalty sharing, is because if they don't keep track of that, they won't know who should be included in the monetization and royalty sharing. So these two are kind of tied together. And finally, no deep fake deception. This kind of goes along with the artist's control over voice and likeness. Absolutely. AI output should not impersonate real artists without consent. I believe that. Now, with respect to the two things that I've marked not likely, okay, my explanation for those is this. It's just not possible in the way that the AI works. The AI, when it makes a, quote, trap song, it could have been trained on 100,000, probably more, trap songs, right? And when it generates the output for the user, it doesn't know which specific trap songs were used to make that output, in terms of it didn't use specific trap songs. It used all the trap songs to do that. So what that would mean is if I made a trap beat and it had to be attributed and royalty sharing, there could potentially be 10,000 people that went into the songs that were used to train. So it's already kind of ridiculous that someone can be listed as a composer when they've, well, I don't want to say it's ridiculous, because quite honestly, if you add a line, a lyric to a song and you get a composer credit, that's great. I actually think that's great. But this is with human-made music, right? But if you're learning off of 100,000 trap songs with 10,000 potential composers, producers, performers, and labels, in other words, there's going to be like 10,000 people involved in it, what do you think the percentages to those people are really going to be? It's going to be nothing. And it's going to be ridiculous to have to put the credits for that song out. You're going to need pages upon pages of data. And it's not even, potentially, it's not even using those composers or producers or performers things. It's just that they were included in the overall training data. So if I make a trap song, I have to, and this rule goes into effect, I have to, as Suno, credit every trap composer, every trap producer, every trap performer, every label that deals with trap that had a song in my training data. And that's where I think it becomes ridiculous and not likely. Okay. And again, this goes to the attribution and metadata condition also, right? Remember that the way the generation occurs, it's not trying to mimic anyone's song and style. It's trying to create something based off the prompt. Now, if the prompt has a artist's name in it, maybe you could make that argument, but generally they don't. Okay. But it really gets ridiculous if you start talking about hybrid songs. Now, one of the, in my opinion, cool things about AI is you can actually give it several genres and it'll try to mash them together. So imagine if you asked for a trap, rock, electro song based on gypsy folk music. Okay. You're going to get all the trap training, all the rock training, all the electro training, and all the gypsy folk music training. And now you're going from, let's say, 10,000 potential attributions in there to a million plus. Okay. So this is why I say these are not likely. And I may be wrong. You know, I'm willing to admit when I am wrong, but the courts need to decide this. So as of right now, I'm not wrong. This is just an opinion. So my final thought on this is that AI is a new technology. Okay. There are several issues that could not be accurately predicted or were ignored before it existed. Okay. Yeah, there could have been some nerd sitting in a room somewhere and foresaw all this that's going down. But because we're at where we're at, I would say it didn't happen. Now, as a tool, AI can be used in creative and expressive ways, in my opinion, right? But I admit there are lazy and unimaginative ways as well. You know, these people that are doing the spamming of AI music to put on streaming services. Now, the legal implications of all this should revolve around what's fair and ethical, but those are often going to be subjective opinions. And I would argue that in some cases you have to think about what's fair and ethical. Um, you know, person A is going to think that one thing is fair and ethical, and person B is not going to think the same thing. They might have a slightly different take on it. And at the end of the day, the courts will decide some of these issues. And then we'll see how the technology adjusts or develops from there. If the courts determine that the Suno did train illegally on uh, on the music, well then what'll happen is they'll train differently. They'll adjust, right? And they'll go from there. So AI is not going to go away. I'm pretty sure about that. But the courts are going to kind of decide the direction that things will go in from here. I know this is a long video. If you've made it this far, I thank you for watching, and I hope this helps you understand things a bit better. If you have any questions or concerns, please do leave it in the comments. I'll try to see it and answer it if I can. And again, thanks for watching.